Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I'm ready to do my full review on the Kershaw Bareknuckle Sprint Run in M390 and carbon fiber. This has been a fun one to experience because it's just been a long time since I've been excited about a Kershaw, and it's not that I have anything against Kershaws. I've owned plenty of them. In fact, in years ago, before I was like in the hobby but was into knives and carrying them, it was very common for me to have a Kershaw in my pocket. I had a Cryo that I carried a lot. I think that's a Hinderer design, now that I think about it. I'm pretty sure I loaned that to my buddy Kyle. I might have just given it to him. I don't know. I think Kyle has that knife now. Anyway, it's been a while since there's been a Kershaw that I even really considered buying. I guess there's been a couple here and there. That's not totally fair. Like, I almost bought a copper Natrix at one point. I ended up passing on it, and I don't necessarily regret that. I just don't think if I were to get most of the knives in Kershaw's lineup at this point, that they would make it into pocket based on the other things that I own. And I don't want to seem like I'm above any knives generally, but there are some knives I feel like I'm above. Like, I'm not going to own or carry an M-Tech or most Gerbers, or, like, I mean, there may be exceptions in the Gerber lineup of something that I would like, or there may be like a specific model from SOG knives that I would enjoy, or there might be a few diamonds in the rough for brands like Kershaw of knives that I would actually like. But in general, compared to the production knives that I buy at this point, many of them being Spydercos and Benchmades and stuff, I just feel like the weight class that Kershaw is in, it's not up against the competition that's already in my knife case. And so that just kind of is what it is. But I think for different people who are on a different budget, Kershaw makes some fantastic knives that will cut well, that will carry well, and so I like that Kershaw exists, and I like that I'm seeing a lot of the stuff from the kind of upper echelon of knives trickling down to the brands like Kershaw and Gerber and SOG, and they're using materials like carbon fiber and M390. Like, that's not really a game that Kershaw was playing a couple of years ago, as far as I know, and so it's cool to see that trickle-down effect, right, of the premium materials and the methods of making knives and the construction that just a couple of years ago was exclusively for very high-end knives, and now is just becoming much more common in the marketplace. And this is an excellent reflection of that, because not only is this a knife Kershaw is making, but Kershaw is kind of evolving in the sense, from what I can see, that now they're doing sprint runs of knives. And this is, I think, the third sprint run they've done. I assume they'll do more. They did a Leak sprint run, they did a Blur sprint run, and they did this one. And so it's cool to me to see that they're doing that. And each of those sprint runs has a kind of exclusive features to that sprint run, or materials at least. And they're much more exciting materials than what's typically offered on the regular production versions of the knives. So it's just really cool to me that they're doing that. And I appreciate that they're understanding that the market responds to that and that it's an opportunity for them. So all of that being said, I know people love when I ramble about things that aren't the particular knife I'm making the video of, and don't show it to the camera until a few minutes in. So you're welcome to all of you. That's the way I do my videos. And if you don't like it, I'm not the channel for you. That's fine. I'm gonna keep rambling. But this version of this knife, I haven't really progressed past where I was when I did my first impressions video. So if you've watched that, you're largely going to know how I feel about it now. I like all of the materials that are being used here. M390 is a great steel. I imagine the treatment on this M390, I don't have anything to back this up, but based on what I've seen in the past, I guess, would be the most fair way to put it, I doubt that this M390 is treated to the same caliber of like the M390 that they're using at Koenig knives, or like the higher end more expensive knives that are using M390 are probably taking a little more time and care to the way that it's treated. But nonetheless, this knife being an M390, I think is a very good thing. And I think this steel will probably perform much better than many of the other steels that this knife has previously been offered in. I know they also did an exclusive in 20CV with aluminum handles, and I'm drawing a blank on who it is. I'm sure someone will comment down below. But those were really cool. I frankly almost got one of those, and just kind of like how I almost got one of these. It was like, maybe I will. I think I even like literally put one in my cart, and then I backed out because I don't see myself, if I own this knife, carrying and using it compared to the other things I have. It's the same thing, right? But M390, good thing. Carbon fiber, good thing. I happen to really like carbon fiber as a material. I do think it's interesting. I kind of saw this in automotive over the last few years. I worked in the car business for a while, both in new car sales and ultimately in aftermarket, and I've been out of that for a while now. But I've been a car guy my entire life. I've been into cars since I was tiny, just like I've been into knives since I was tiny. But carbon fiber 20 years ago in automotive was like crazy. 30 years ago, it was like out of this world, right? Some of the early applications of carbon fiber were reserved for the most insane supercars of the time that were super limited production, and it was on race cars, and it was on the absolute most insane cars that money could buy, right? And then over time that trickles down and trickles down and trickles down, and then now, like, if you go into a Toyota dealership and you're looking for a Camry or even a Prius or something, they probably offer in their like parts catalog some carbon fiber accessories for those cars. So it's come a long way from being reserved for the ultimate, and now that's what happens over time, right? And then there's also development within the material, right? So the early carbon fiber that was used, if you look back at those, like the first race cars that were using carbon fiber, the finishing and the way it was constructed was nowhere near what they're able to do with carbon fiber now. So if you look now at the supercars and hypercars that come with carbon fiber on them, some of which have full carbon fiber body construction and even carbon fiber frame components, and like you look at a Pagani Huayra, the carbon fiber that's done there, or on a Koenigsegg, it is unreal, especially compared to the early carbon fiber that was used to be a lightweight, strong material and wasn't finished like it is now. And structurally, there's been improvements to it, and in the way that it's built, it's come a long way. So I think the same kind of thing is happening in the realm of knives. And it's already been happening for a long time. This isn't the first expression of it where carbon fiber is on a budget knife. There's way cheaper knives than this that you can get carbon fiber on. But the reality is, I think still, when you look at the carbon fiber that's being used on ultra premium knives, it's nothing like the carbon fiber that is being used on budget knives. And of course it's not. Just like you wouldn't expect the carbon fiber components that you can buy out of the parts catalog at Toyota to be on par with the carbon fiber that goes on a Koenigsegg. It's just not going to happen, right? So, all of that said, this carbon fiber is real carbon fiber, through and through. But the biggest flaw of this knife, in my opinion, is that there are voids in this carbon fiber. And this is the only one of this knife that I've held or even seen in person, so I can't speak to all of these knives. This could be a QC issue, to be fair. It very well may be. But there are several voids in this carbon fiber right on the show side. And also just the milling on this carbon fiber isn't the most clean milling I've ever seen. I doubt it's going to really show up because all these things are very small. But the way that the carbon fiber is finished, it's just not, it's not premium. And is it fair for me to expect the carbon fiber to be premium? No. because it's not a premium knife. This is still a Kershaw offering. It's not a zero tolerance offering. It's not a custom. It's not a mid-tech. It's none of those things, right? But I expect there to not be issues in the finishing on it. Like, there are cheap carbon fiber knives that might not even have the milling like this does and the angles that we're playing with here, which is a relatively complex surface that they've milled onto here. So, granted, those other knives may be more simple, but they don't have any voids. And so the fact that there are voids present on here, I just think ultimately that's something that I don't necessarily think is acceptable. Because at the end of the day, this is a budget knife with really good materials. But if you take good materials and you don't finish them properly, then why even use the good materials at all? Like, if I'm thinking about carbon fiber versus aluminum for handle scales, because there was an aluminum version of this knife with 20 CV. 20 CV is essentially equivalent to M390. So if I were to pick between the knives, on paper, I'd go carbon fiber. I like carbon fiber better than aluminum for handle scales, especially for a knife like this. I think it makes a lot of sense. It's lightweight, it's strong. For sorry about that. My internal temperature on the camera got too hot and it had to pause, if that's any evidence of how hot it is out here. Anyways, what I think I was saying is that if I was comparing this knife, carbon fiber and M390, to 20 CV and aluminum, which I don't have, but exists, right? On paper, I should want to pick this. And I would if I hadn't experienced this. But having experienced this carbon fiber and how it's done, I'd pick the aluminum one. Because I think that they're probably more consistent in how they're doing their aluminum, based on what I've seen Kershaw do with the aluminum on this knife. It's how they build the standard one. So the upgraded one that's just coated a different color, those handle scales should be fine. And there's not going to be any voids in that aluminum, I wouldn't think. So, yeah, I think this was a cool exercise for Kershaw to do a sprint run. And I hope that it was just this one that had a few kind of issues with it. Because otherwise, like, honestly, beyond that, this is a knife that really kind of punches above its weight. I think it was a little over $100, and it carries super well. It's nice and light. I like the lock type. This, I think they call it a sub-frame lock, if I'm not crazy. It's kind of this bar that's mounted in the aluminum, and in the carbon fiber rather, and it works really well. It locks up solid. The deployment, it's not like the most buttery smooth. I mean, it's not drop shutty, but it's a reliable action that's pretty satisfying to play with. I like the sounds that it makes. It's got this kind of tactile sensation to it. Yeah, the profile of it in pocket is great. It's fairly lightweight. There's a lot of good happening here. One of my favorite things about this knife as well is how thin it is. This knife is very, very thin, and you can feel it in the pocket. Or rather, you can not feel it as much as you would if it were thicker. It's a pleasant knife to carry, and for how thin it is, the ergos are pretty good. I like that the jimping is pretty muted jimping. It's not overly aggressive, and it's only right here. And it just, for how thin this knife is, it feels pretty good in my hand. The shape of the handle it's cut well. The profile works good. The blade shape is a little bit interesting in that you've got this kind of belly, and then it's like a flat out to here that almost looks like it slightly kind of hawkbills out for the tip. But what that does for the tip is, I've found when you're like cutting through tape and stuff, it's a really great tip for actual cutting. It's kind of like a sheep's foot or a Warncliffe type of thing happening here, but it's fairly thin behind the edge. Not like thin, but for a Kershaw, it's a good grind, and the edge is even. The bevels are nice. Like, there's a lot of good happening here. It's a very sharp factory edge as well. I like the hardware that they've used on it. I like that it's kind of an all blacked out aesthetic, although I would prefer a satin blade to this like black stone wash. That's just me personally. But it's done very well in just about every way, other than the issues on the carbon. And I don't think they're going to pose like a structural problem for the knife. I wouldn't be worried about carrying and using this knife. So if you're less nitpicky than me, and you're not like looking at the knife to see if there's anything wrong with it, then you may not even notice it. But I can't help but see it every time that I hold this knife, and I judge it for it. And whether you think that's fair or not, that's the reality. So, in essence, I would like to see more sprint runs from Kershaw, but if they use carbon fiber again, I just hope they get that down. Because all the carbon fiber I've experienced from Zero Tolerance has been excellent. Zero Tolerance is Kershaw, right? It's their more premium line, and so they have the capabilities internally to do that. I imagine they're probably using different machines, maybe even a different shop when they're making ZT knives, but if they can do it at ZT, they could do it at Kershaw. It doesn't have to be perfection, like amazing. I don't even expect like incredible, mind-blowing quality from Zero Tolerance. They're still production, and even though they're not budget, they're not like ultra premium, right? But this is just not quite acceptable. It needs to be better than this on the carbon fiber for me to like really want to. I don't even want to say endorse. It's not like I'm endorsing products. That's not what my channel is about. But to stand behind and recommend. So there you have it. That'll be my full review on the Kershaw Bareknuckle Sprint Run M390 and carbon fiber. And there you have it.